Welcome to the On a Mission Mojo podcast, where I have the pleasure of interviewing impact-driven founders, entrepreneurs, authors, and business experts who are actively working to create a positive difference in our world. I'm your host, Lori Young, a branding specialist, certified master marketer, and a passionate advocate for brands that possess heart, soul, and an unwavering commitment to drive change for humanity. It takes grit, a visionary mindset, and an abundance of mojo to navigate this journey. And the stories I share will undoubtedly ignite your passion. If you're seeking an infusion of inspiration, motivation, and valuable insights to amplify your impact, let's dive right in. Welcome to episode 27 of On a Mission Mojo podcast. I know that most of you that are listening are running a heart-centered and mission-driven business. Often it can be very difficult to stay in a positive state of mind. Oftentimes we feel like we are just surviving from day to day. And our next guest is going to help us thrive, to minimize stress, and to set our brains up for success so that we can have a lot more fun and just a lot more meaning in our business. So let me introduce to you Phyllis Phyllis Ginsberg, widely recognized as a survival to thrival expert, stands at the forefront of igniting personal transformation in the modern era. With a wealth of experience as an international speaker, best-selling author, and seasoned therapist, Phyllis has become a catalyst for authentic change in individuals seeking to transcend mere survival and embrace a thriving existence in the face of life's challenges. Her impact reverberates across numerous esteemed platforms, including her feature in the compelling documentary, The Courage to Continue, and recognition in prominent media outlets such as Women's World, CNBC, Parade, and Health and Wellbeing magazines. On a mission to cultivate a world where individuals no longer navigate life in survival mode, Phyllis asserts living in survival is a stressful way to live, and we can shift that. In her forthcoming book, Empowered You, Free Yourself from Generational Conditioning to Unleash Confidence, Happiness, and Resilience, Phyllis provides a transformative guide empowering individuals to break free from the constraints of the past and embark on a journey towards self-discovery and empowerment. So welcome, Phyllis. That was a mouthful for me to read through.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So let's just expound a little bit about on your mission. What are you trying to accomplish in this world?
I had a magic wand, which some days I do.
Okay.
I would have people enjoying life rather than merely enduring it.
Got it.
And I speak to this from two different angles. One is there are people who have gone through significant trauma, right? Trauma is stressful,
Sure.
and the lasting impact of childhood trauma does not go away as we age and get older. It's like time does not always heal everything.
Right.
Because trauma gets stored in our subconscious. There's big traumas, and I've worked with plenty of domestic violence, child abuse, rape cases, like you name it. In my career, I have dealt with lots of that.
Right.
But what I have discovered is that the majority of people who did not experience big traumas still have the same effects of stressful living, self-doubt, worries, fears, overwhelm. The society we live in values productivity over us being human beings.
Yes.
Absolutely. And we've reached this peak that is no longer sustainable.
Right.
That's why I do what I do.
Absolutely. I think in, America especially, it's like if you don't subscribe to the hustle culture, then, you're not seen as, being an achiever or being successful or whatever. Like, it's just frowned upon. I feel like, there's such competition. You see it in sports, you see it on social media, you see it like everywhere. This comparison, this competition, this hustle culture. And I agree with you. It's not easy to maintain that type of lifestyle, and it's not healthy, which is why we have so much disease in our world, right? All the cancer, the heart disease, the everything that we're experiencing.
Right.
So go ahead.
If I may interject, what I'm
Yes.
seeing a significant increase, not just in adults, but children, of
Mhm.
anxiety,
Yes.
depression, addictions, and suicides.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Worldwide. This isn't just the
Yes.
US, this is worldwide.
Right. That's, yeah.
It's an epidemic.
It is an epidemic. It really is. And so thank you for the work that you're doing. I know you're only one person, but you know what? If you can help one person or two people or three people, then you're making an impact.
Oh, for
Uh,
sure. The ripple
the
effect.
ripple effect, absolutely. So I guess help me understand, like, how did you get here? Like, everyone kind of has a story or a catalyst that brings them to the work that they do. Tell me what it is for you.
The Probably the number one thing that I came to realize, oh, it has to be over 20 years ago,
Hmm.
is that my mom didn't have the resources to give me what I needed
Right.
growing up,
Yes. Hmm.
because she didn't get those resources. And
Hmm.
I'm sure her parents didn't have the resources, because
Right.
generationally, none of us really got the resources we need to have a solid foundation as a human being,
Hmm.
to live our lives in ways where we feel good about ourselves, so we can be productive, we could be there for each other, our families, our children, our work, whatever we choose to do.
Right.
That's missing.
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny. I think it was Love is Blind yesterday. And it's just a fun little reality show that we watch. And I was just noticing some of the interactions between some of the people that are on the show and their parents. And there were a few where there was such nurturing,
Hmm.
between like the father and daughter or the daughter and her mother. And there was just this overwhelming sense like, wow, this parent really supports their child. They are cheerleading for them. They have this genuine connection and love for their child. Not everyone got that. I don't feel I got that. Not on the level that I needed. And then you're right. It creates this trauma. If it's mild, major, whatever it is, that makes it difficult for us to live our lives in a resilient way. I guess, right? We're kind of always battling those inner demons.
Right, because it isn't, I've noticed, like, in the last, let's say, 10, 15 years or so, children became more sensitive.
Hmm.
But what prior to that, it was like, don't feel, don't be. The messages we got were, if you are sad or angry, you're too much. I can't handle you and your emotions. So you need to go, like, do that somewhere else. Or you want to cry, I'll give you something to cry about.
Oh my gosh, yes, I hate
Right.
that saying.
So we were invalidated when we had any feeling, but our
Hmm.
parents sure had lots of feelings. I don't know if you grew up with a parent who was angry or hostile or abusive, but, like, yeah, I
Right.
grew up in a household where it did not feel safe,
Sure. Hmm.
and then I had no outlet.
Right. Right. Oh, I remember I probably from the age of 5 being told you're too sensitive. You're too sensitive, Lori. You're too sensitive. It's just like, even today, people say that to me. You're so sensitive. And it's like, and is that a problem? Like, to be sensitive, right? But I think when people have difficulty dealing with or handling other people's emotions,
Hmm.
then they kind of push it off as you're too sensitive, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Because most people, like, we didn't get a handbook how to deal with ourselves or our
Hmm.
children,
Hmm.
and there's going to be conflict, but no one really warned us about that.
Right.
And I don't think very many of us, I certainly didn't learn how to deal with conflict or competing needs or sibling rivalry. Like, all this stuff is just like stress on stress on stress when your bandwidth is already low and you don't have internal resources or knowing.
Right. Right.
And what do? Then you start like yelling and screaming at your kids and threatening them or hitting them.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. So I would guess that not everybody is totally tuned into what it means or what it feels like to be living in survival mode. What are some of the signs that people should be kind of looking for to recognize, maybe I am in survival mode?
Yeah, I would say the the very good thing about our brains is that we're so adaptable that
Right.
being in survival mode is our normal.
Yes.
Okay,
Hmm.
so no problem. Like, there's no judgment if you don't recognize that you're in
Sure.
survival mode, because you don't know any different until you get some information. So here's some signs. If you are irritable,
Hmm.
if you're not listening to your body signals when you have minor aches and pains, maybe a little sore throat, sniffles, like, and you tell yourself, the show must go on. I've got to go to work. I'm going to override these symptoms.
Hmm.
Those are all like pushing yourself to do things that your body is saying, wait a minute, we need like a break, we need to rest, we need some nourishment, we need some attention. uh,
Hmm.
Pushing yourself to the limit. If you find that you are unable to carry out what you want to do, choose to do, need to do, you're
Hmm.
probably in survival mode.
Right. Yeah, it's funny because, like, I run a business, you run a business, lots of people that are listening run a business, and sometimes it feels like if we want to run a business, if we want to be able to make money, or if we want to be able to grow, if we want to be able to serve our clients, if we want to be able to do X, right, we do sometimes have to push through and do things even when we don't feel like it. Like, what are your, like, I guess, what's your thoughts about that? Because sometimes we're just tired, but
Yeah, we have to show up if we want something to
right.
happen, right?
Hmm.
You can't just not take any action and expect to have a thriving business. But the idea of self care,
Hmm.
if you were raised to believe that it's selfish to take care of yourself, or
Hmm.
putting yourself first is bad or wrong, and you should just be of service and uh, sacrifice your life for others, right?
Right.
Like, being on, having a mission can be a very satisfying thing, but
Sure.
not if you do it at the expense of yourself.
Right.
And so
Absolutely.
showing up tired, that's fine. And then acknowledge it and see if you can take a nap, do a meditation, go to bed
Hmm.
early. Like, you've got to do something to remedy the tired. Otherwise, if you continue tired, 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 it only takes 1 or 2 nights of not sleeping well to
Hmm.
affect your sleep for a whole week. Like, it takes days to recover from one night of not sleeping well.
Right.
And
Yeah,
how
I
many people don't
noticed.
sleep well night after night?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I noticed too, like, for me, get more mentally tired than physically tired. Like, I'm doing a pretty good job, I think, of sleeping at night, But I know by the end of my day, I am so mentally tired. Like I can tell my brain is like enough. Like one of the things I was talking to, I can't remember who I was talking to about this. Oh, it was our house cleaner, and she was just going on and on about how she listens to all these podcasts, and she's doing all these things to better herself, and why shouldn't I listen to podcasts to make myself better, instead of listening to music. And I was just like listening to her, I was like exhausted, because I was thinking to myself, okay, I am like in a mental state, like of working all day long. My brain is so tired by the end of the day. And yes, usually at the end of the day, I go for a workout. I'm either walking outside or I'm going to the gym, or doing something. And I kept asking myself, geez, should I be like listening to a podcast to better myself at the gym? But then I was just like, no, I need to listen to music. Like I need like a release in my brain. Like I don't need to be putting even more stuff into my brain because it's already full and tired.
When you recognize that you're on what I'll call overload,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's no more space. You have no more capacity to process more things. Uh, you've probably overdone it on the I should be, right?
Right.
And when I don't know how I ended up being able to allow myself to just be. Well, I kind of do. I was in burnout
Right.
and had to take some time off. And it really took 6 months to get clients out of my head.
Mm.
And so I didn't have, well, I had the choice, but I didn't have the choice of functioning at my high level, that peak performance that I had when I was doing custody evaluations for high conflict divorce cases.
Mm-hmm.
What I ended up doing was taking some time off, sitting in the garden, playing in the dirt, doing jigsaw puzzles, playing games with my kids before they grew
Right.
up and went off to college. And I watched the Oprah show. We're going back
Sure.
2005, 2006. And when I came out of that, I discovered that being was really important, and taking some time to not think. And,
Mm.
you know, meditation is not meant necessarily to not think. We don't
Mm-hmm.
need to focus on turning our brains off. What we need to focus on is what brings us joy and happiness. And if you're in the present moment, let's say you're playing a game, whether it doesn't matter if it's a board game, if it's a
Mm-hmm.
game of tennis or pickleball or like cards, it doesn't matter what it is, you're engaged, you're in that
Yes.
moment. You're not thinking about all the other stuff.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we need to have some moments of play and fun and enjoyment.
Absolutely. I was just going to ask you like what tips you could share on, one of the things that I've been practicing this year, starting in 2024, is really trying to cut off work at 4:30, 5 o'clock, going to the gym, and then just really trying to be more engaged mentally in my life. But I will admit that my brain does not shut off. I'm thinking about a client interaction from earlier in the day, or I'm thinking about what I need to be accomplishing with a client, or it's like I'm trying to shut my brain down. Like, what tips
Yeah.
can you share with listeners on how do you really, like, you can cut it off? Sure, you can close the computer, right? And say, okay, I'm done with work, but you're not.
No.
Mentally, you're not.
So,
So, what can you
yeah,
do?
my recommendation, you see this?
Uh
A
huh.
notepad.
Okay.
Or you can use your phone, notes in your phone.
Okay.
The more things that you put on paper, that you dump out of your brain. So you have a thought about a client, something, whatever that thought is, write it down. You've
Okay.
got an idea. Oh, I need to do this for work. Write it down. And if it's really urgent, do it now. If not,
Okay.
it'll wait. It'll be loyal and wait for you. But you don't miss. Here's what happens is that for most of us, if we don't write something down, we are afraid we're going to forget it.
True.
And
Yes.
so we work really hard at keeping everything stored in the file cabinet.
Yes.
But you can free your brain by creating notes and going back to them. You
Yes. Yesterday that happened to me.
Mhm.
I shut the computer down. I walked to the gym, worked out. While I was at the gym, I got this idea for a content idea, right? I'm a content creator, so I write a lot of content. And I'm like, oh my God, like if I don't text myself and give me the highlights of what I was thinking about, I am definitely not going to remember it. So that I will do that sometimes. It's just text myself a little note, and that way I have it in my text messages when I need to go back to it. Same kind of idea, like you said, is writing things down.
because you never know when brilliance will strike. When it,
Absolutely.
right? And you don't want to turn things off. What I would say is you want to be in alignment with how you receive, I call it intuition or guidance, those thoughts, the brainstorms that who knows where they come from.
Hmm.
Sometimes I'll get them at 3 in the morning. So I
Yes.
take up my phone and I type things in my notes and go back to sleep. When I'm on airplanes, I've had the best downloads of things. I've written my books almost like the majority of a lot of my good stuff has come during my 20 minutes of quiet meditation where I'm just open to
Mm.
receiving information and I have my pad of paper.
Hmm.
So I'm not trying to get rid of thoughts.
Right.
That's like an inner struggle that you
Hmm.
don't want to have.
Yeah, that's, speaking of meditation, always personally, and I'm sure other people feel the same way. I've always struggled personally with maintaining a meditation practice. And I think it's because I am so active, and I have a hard time like sitting still. Like for me to like sit in bed and just do nothing, or just lay around the house and do nothing, I can't do it. Like I just have to be doing something. And so I think for me, meditation is like, you're wasting your time, Lori. You're just sitting here doing nothing. But what I've started to do is look at meditation a little bit differently. And that is because somewhere along the line, somebody introduced me to the idea of a walking meditation. And it was like, okay, I can be doing something and meditating. So I can be taking a walk, and that can be meditative for me.
Hmm.
Like,
There. Oh, go
what do
ahead.
you like? Yeah, I guess what do you recommend for people maybe who are struggling to get into like an active form of meditation?
So meditation, the purpose of it
Hmm.
for me when I first started was to deal with stress and to calm my nervous system.
Okay.
And this goes way back, like 40 plus years ago.
Okay.
In the last several years, I don't just sit quietly all the time. I will often listen to a guided meditation. And it could be a
Okay.
walking meditation. It could be a meditation that prompts me to think about a future event, to be
Hmm.
able to embody it, to see it, feel it, be in it as if it's happening now, and
Hmm.
walk as if that's already like it's happened, it's happening. I'm that
Hmm.
person who
So kind
who
of like a visioning type
mm-hmm,
exercise, right?
right.
So now, is there anybody that you highly recommend? Like some really great, just really great guides with guided meditation?
I like Dr. Joe Dispenza's meditations.
Okay, I know him. Okay.
Yeah. And he's got a lot of science behind it, both
Mm-hmm.
from a brain perspective, but physiologically. And our thoughts, like scientists across the board, this isn't just Dr. Joe's experiments or scientific
Mm-hmm.
trials that they've been doing, uh, have shown that our thoughts actually impact our cells and our physiology. So if we're in survival mode, if we're in stress, fight
Mm-hmm.
or flight, we've got hormones that are racing through our body to
Right.
give us the energy to fight or flee.
Mm-hmm.
That's meant to be temporary, not chronic.
Right. Yes.
And so we need to find ways that can calm down the thoughts, the nervous system, our ability, not necessarily that we have to be able to sit still, but
Mm-hmm.
that we have congruence between our thoughts and our feelings and our actions.
Right. One of the things that I think is probably universal that most human beings struggle with is this whole idea of, stinking thinking, right? Just these negative thoughts that infiltrate our brains. One of the things I've been doing lately is just like trying to recognize them. Oh, here comes one of those thoughts. Stop, like interrupt it and replace it with an encouraging. I find myself like talking to myself. It's going to be okay, Lori. You're doing the best that you can. Like just what can you share with us about how we can deal with these negative thoughts and like retrain our brain? I know my son, my younger son, bless his heart, he has such a hard time with this, and I always am saying to him, you got to change the way you're thinking. But how do I do that, Mom? How do I do that? And it's like, I don't even know. But you just got to do it. Help us like know how to change our thinking.
So the great thing about our brain is that most things are in patterns, right?
Hmm.
Like we have patterns of thoughts, patterns of feelings, patterns of action. Almost everything we do is pretty predictable.
Okay.
And if you have negative thinking, which 80% of our thoughts are negative, and that's that survival bias, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have had to be on the lookout for things that would be problems or go wrong for survival. But now
Right.
it's like things are like way to the extreme.
Sure.
There's an extensive part in my new book, Empowered You, on replacing patterns of thoughts. And I'll give you
Okay.
some examples.
Okay.
One is to change your perspective.
Okay.
So you can look at a problem from a variety of different questions, like
Mm-hmm.
what else is possible? How can I solve this in the most easy way? Who can help me with this? So you're
Mm-hmm.
asking questions to resolve something. You're not just exchanging one thought for another, because your subconscious obviously has that negativity bias to keep you safe.
Right. Right.
Now, when you get to a place where changing a perspective could be, wow, okay, I was going to say my boss yelled at me, but I'm my boss and I don't yell at myself.
You
Um,
probably yell at yourself sometimes.
Not so much anymore.
That's good.
But
Good for you.
let's say that you have, I don't know, somebody that you're dealing with. Maybe
Hmm.
it's a rep that you hire, or you've got a VA, somebody that
Right.
helps
Hmm.
you, and they are cranky and they make a snide comment, maybe a
Mm.
judgmental or some critical comment,
That happens to me. Yes.
right? And you
Hmm.
absorb that
Hmm. Right.
and you think, wow, maybe they're right. Maybe I don't know how to do this and I'm never going to figure it out. And you go down that spiral, right? That
Sure.
rabbit hole. A new perspective could be, I wonder what's happening for that person.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe they've got a sick child at home. Maybe they
Right.
didn't get sleep. Right. So adding that perspective of it could be someone else's situation that prompts their reaction to you rather than you are the one that prompted the reaction.
Right. Right. Yeah, just looking at things differently. That kind of recently happened to me where one of my team members made kind of a snarky remark, and I was just like, ouch. Like it kind of like, set me back. And one of the things that I think that I tend to do, like I either like, okay, let me just ignore that remark, let me acknowledge and validate that remark. And I find that the more that I can acknowledge and validate and show compassion for where that person is, like the easier it is for that person to get to what's really going on with them. Oh, my dog's had diarrhea for the last 3 days. My son has a lung infection, refuses to take antibiotics, and this is happening. It's like, wow, okay, no wonder you're making snarky remarks because you're stressed. So we can get into the human condition and understand what's actually going on rather than taking it personally.
Right. And this goes back to the way that all of us pretty much have been raised is you show up, you do your work, you don't bring your personal life into your work, right? And so no one really knows what's going on within the people on your team. They're just
Unless you
there.
ask.
Exactly. Or you see that they're in distress
Mm-hmm.
or they're acting in ways that aren't like who they normally show up to be.
Right, right. And it's funny because it's like you think about all the different people in your lives that are in different emotional states at any given moment. And if you're in that same emotional state, then it turns into an explosion. So the more I think that we can take care of ourselves and really nurture ourselves, the more we are open and able to meet other people, other loved ones in our lives that might be in a distressing situation.
For sure. And that is one of the primary reasons why I write the books I do and do
Mm-hmm.
the work I do with individuals is because I know if circumstances were different, I would have
Right.
had parents who were available to me.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And I think everybody could probably say, probably numerous times during childhood, I didn't get what I needed when I needed because no one was available.
Yes. That's true. And it's funny, how do you like, especially with parents, or maybe it's spouses, or maybe it's like there's certain relationships that keep repeating the same kind of patterns. Like I know, for instance, I can't talk to my mom about certain things because it's always going to lead down the same road that's going to make me start feeling frustrated. And so it's like I just avoid. Like, okay, just avoid that topic. Don't go there. Stay with these topics because they're safe, right? And that can happen with anyone, with your spouse, with a boss, coworkers, whatever. How do we break those patterns and keep ourselves like growing and not stuck in these toxic patterns that aren't serving us?
Yeah, so the real growth is
Mm-hmm.
to look at those patterns,
Mm-hmm.
have compassion for
Mm.
the people that, let's say, aren't as aware as you are.
Yeah,
Maybe they aren't they aren't being put in a position where they're ready to look at it.
sure.
It may
Mm-hmm.
not feel safe, so they're going to put up defenses, they're going to
Mm-hmm.
project, they're going to create some kind of distance. So
Right.
anytime you bring up something and it goes haywire, and creates conflict, that creates distance for
Right.
safety.
Right.
And
For
so
safety. Yes.
yep, the
Hmm.
real growth is if somebody were to bring up the topic, not you, but let's say your mom, that she brings up something and you don't want to talk about it, that you're not impacted negatively or triggered by that, but you can actually, even internally, saying, wow, I have a lot of compassion for what she's gone through.
Yeah.
And when you come at it from compassion, then it's a whole different conversation.
Oh my gosh, that is so true. So, so true. Like, if we just had the capacity to, and how do we build that compassion? Are
So
there, yeah.
yeah, I've written about compassion in my book. There's also um, experts in compassion.
Mm-hmm.
So there's whole books on compassion.
Mm-hmm.
It is something that was not taught. I think that it's it's been in in the works
Mm-hmm.
for it to become more mainstream, if you want.
Right.
But having compassion means allowing other people to have their view, to have their perception, to even have their hurts and pain if they're not ready to let go of it, if they're not willing
Mm-hmm.
to address it. Like, let them be where they're at
Yeah.
until they ask for help, until they maybe have struggled enough, hit bottom,
Mm-hmm.
right? We all know people that perhaps are struggling or have struggled with addictions. And how many times does it take until you finally get
Mm,
to
right.
where you're ready to, as they say, walk down a different street,
Right.
do
Right.
things differently?
Yeah. And it can be hard sometimes, feeling compassion or showing compassion when you see what the other person may not be seeing. So
Mhm.
we get impatient and we get frustrated with another person's journey because maybe it's not going as fast as we would like for it to go, and we fall into another pattern of judgment.
Mhm.
You know, and it just kind of spirals from there.
But isn't that what you just described, the way that we were all raised?
Yes.
Parents put expectations on us. They rushed us to become who they wanted us to be.
Hmm.
They led us down this path without taking into consideration who we are as individuals, that we might have different interests or passions, that we might be more sensitive, right? Like, all these things. And so when we recognize that in ourselves, like, oh, I don't want to put that pressure on someone else. And who am
Sure.
I to say what's right for them?
True. Very true. That's a really good way to look at it. Let's go back to this concept of play and thriving. What can you tell listeners are some of the habits that they can build into their everyday life to put their brains in a place of thriving versus surviving?
So anytime that you break the pattern of either stressful thoughts, fear, worry, overwhelm,
Hmm.
anxiety, like that's the goal, is to break the pattern,
Okay.
interrupt it. So you can interrupt the pattern by looking for your happiest moment of the day.
Okay. All right.
If you were going to keep a journal at night and write 3 to 5 of your happiest moments of the day in that journal, you'd be going around during the day looking for what makes me happy.
True. That's true.
And right now you could say, oh, look at all those beautiful flowers, the blossoms on the trees, we have just some amazing orange poppies that are
Mm.
growing out of the sidewalk.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh wow, that ripened orange just makes me so happy. The
Hmm.
first sip of like coffee or tea in the morning. It doesn't have to be anything big. It doesn't have to cost money, but spending a moment to acknowledge when you feel good or happy
Hmm.
and what makes you do that. Using music can be a really great pattern interrupt. When you put
Okay.
on something that you find uplifting or
Mm-hmm.
inspirational,
Mm-hmm.
that changes they can change like your whole chemistry and your whole outlook.
Do you recommend that people listen to music like while they work or
That's personal. And
right?
that I don't think we're talking about two different things. One is the pattern interrupt,
Mm-hmm.
and then playing music while you work. You don't want to interrupt patterns. You want something to help you be in flow with what you're doing.
Sure, sure.
But if you want to interrupt patterns and do more things that make you resilient,
Mm-hmm.
being happy is one of the characteristics. Having patience,
Okay.
allowing for things to be the way they are,
Mm-hmm.
uh, waiting your turn, waiting until something like you get some feedback on something rather than just going and trying to force something to happen,
Okay. All right.
waiting for the inspiration to know when it feels right to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Like we all as entrepreneurs, I think, know that we can do a lot of things like throwing spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks,
Right.
or we could be really mindful and patient and wait for an answer, like what's my next best step,
Mm-hmm.
what would really serve the people I'm here to serve. And when you get clarity, then you're taking deliberate action, you know what to do. But if
Right.
you're in stress and fear, anger, anxiety, overwhelm, you aren't accessing the little messages that you get through intuition or guidance or
Mm,
whatever that you might call that, the wisdom that comes through.
right. Absolutely. I was thinking about what you were saying about intuition, and I think a lot of times we get caught in these patterns of comparing ourselves and looking at all of the experts and saying I should be doing this and I should be doing that and this, I should be doing this, but it's like, is that really the best thing for you or your business? It may not be. And so I think we do have to turn inward. I often ask clients, how do you feel about that? Well, so and so said, I should do this. How do you feel about that? Like, does that feel like the right thing for you? Or they'll ask me, what should I do? Should I do this or should I do that? Or should I name my webinar this? Or what do you think it should be? What do you think it should be? And just kind of training ourselves to go back to ourselves, like you said, and
Mhm.
our intuition and our highest self. And because I feel like that's when we're going to be in the best place, is when we are totally aligned with our true like authenticity.
You have said it so well. Yes, I totally agree because there are so many experts out there that will tell you this is the proven method. And yes, it has worked for them and they want to share it with the world. That's awesome. But there are an infinite number of ways to do things. And if I were to look at all the different ways that I could be launching my book,
Mm-hmm.
it would be overwhelming. I wouldn't enjoy doing them all.
Right.
And so choosing to do it my way, to do it in a way that resonates with who I am, what I'm
Mm-hmm.
comfortable with, what my bandwidth is,
Right.
how much time I want to spend, what my goals are.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
we have not been conditioned from the time we were little to pay attention to our inner world, our
Mm,
body sensations, how we feel, what resonates with us. And I think that that is a huge piece of beginning to have a life that we can enjoy and thrive.
yeah. There is so much goodness in this episode. So many great tips. I think some of my favorites are to play and be in the moment. Like I think about, I'm learning to play golf, and you're so right. When I'm like practicing golf, I am not thinking about anything except for how do I swing this club to hit this tiny little ball? And I'm not thinking about work. I don't have a care in the world. I am so focused on golf. And I think the same can go for like if you're doing puzzles, like you're like focused on like what piece goes where, or if you're doing like arts and crafts, like just getting lost in that moment, music, dancing, hanging out with friends, whatever you can do to play, I think. And I think that's one of my favorite. And then just coming back to yourself and just turning inwards, that's another favorite. There was so much goodness in this episode, so I appreciate you sharing. Why don't we just end with talking about my favorite question, which is what is your personal mojo in the world, and how do you like maintain that mojo so you're like operating at your best?
So for me, slowing down enough to be in touch with my guidance and intuition has to be my number one mojo.
Okay.
Uh, because when I don't come just from my human self, as I like to call it, but I can receive the intuitive messages, then I know I'm spot on because it never leads me in a wrong direction. It's always on my side.
Awesome.
And then I remind myself that it's not about the destination, but the journey.
Mm-hmm.
And my goal is to enjoy the journey, but even
Yes.
bigger than that, it's noticing like, who do I get to be when I do this, when I achieve this, or along the way. And I'll tell you, along the way to getting this third book of mine published, I had a lot of moments that I was challenged and I had to overcome, and writing about this content of generational conditioning and messages, like all that stuff I had to kind of work through again, or for the
Right.
first time, there's new stuff that showed up. So I'm definitely not the same person I was when I embarked on this project.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is like the greatest joy. No matter how many books get sold, I got to be like who upgraded to who I am today.
Yeah, that's great. And when is your third book coming out?
March 12th.
Oh, geez, it's just around the corner. Okay, and
Yes.
what's the name of your book?
I have my proof copy. It's called
Okay.
Empowered You.
Uh huh.
Free yourself from generational conditioning to unleash confidence, happiness, and resilience.
I love it. I love it. So by the time this episode goes live, your book will be out there and selling lots of copies already, I'm sure. And listeners can grab a copy. I will make sure to put that in the show notes. So thank you so much, Phyllis, for being here today. You have just shared your heart and your wisdom, and I'm most grateful for that.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yes. That's a wrap on today's episode. Thank you for tuning in to the On a Mission Mojo podcast. Ready to dive into more incredible stories of people on a mission? Next week, I'll return with a fresh episode to ignite your passion for creating a better world. If you loved what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave a glowing review, and spread the word to all your friends. Head over to onamissionbrands.com for more great episodes. Remember, the world needs your mojo, so go out there and let your brilliance shine.